I know that that's going to be difficult to follow, but I have no doubt that our next speaker is up to the task. Is Dr. Byron Brazier in the room? Yes. All right, great. When we first met, we had a 30-minute meeting schedule, and 2 hours later, I knew that we had to get him here to share with you the story that he is about to tell. It is very innovative, and it's something that I think we can all learn some pretty interesting factoids in terms of how he has been able to put together something that is very innovative, addresses real workforce opportunities for people that sometimes are left behind. And I want to also alert you that there's a very interesting article from Crane's Business that is on your conference app. So if you have not downloaded your conference app, it's another opportunity because I don't think you want to miss this particular article. Dr. Brazier is the current pastor of the Apostolic Church of God in Woodlawn, which is here in Chicago, and he has a very accomplished business background. Ladies and gentlemen, I know you're going to enjoy learning about community building through social enterprise. Dr. Brazier?
Good morning, almost good afternoon to everyone. It's a pleasure to be here, and I certainly appreciate this opportunity to tell I think, a compelling story about a small community, 2 square miles, that makes up Woodlawn. That even though the previous president of the United States doesn't say, they call it Jackson Park, where they're going to put the new library, but that new library is actually in the community of Woodlawn. My intent today, if I get this to, here we go, is to explain a little bit more about the Brazier Foundation, which is a foundation that I founded in 2012, named after my father, in the 2 aspects that it has in community building, along with a manufacturing L3C that we actually opened up on last week. And this really comes down to this community building was highlighted through a conversation that I had with a friend who talked about communities and the idea of transformation. And he said that we in the human services business, we manage people in their condition. And if you manage someone in poverty, that's where they stay. And so the whole idea was, how now do you transform an entire community? How do you change the perception of the community inside the community as well as outside the community? And we began that process by focusing on stakeholders to be truly inclusive and creating voices for transformation. So a community meeting or community engagement is not a meeting. It is a series of very complex understandings of voices. And the idea is that when you create a community vision, a community plan, it must also have a comprehensive apparatus to go along with that plan. And so this particular dual slide acknowledges that in deficit communities, we are programmed half to death. And this is and it's all mixed up, and there are at least 100 of these. I just couldn't put everything on a page. And one of the things that I've told the University of Chicago, which is part of its campus is in Woodlawn, is that you guys run hundreds of millions of dollars worth of programs, but Woodlawn is still the same. And so programming doesn't get you through to the ecology of a community. So we took a strategic approach, looking at community vision and developing a community plan, driven by stakeholders, utilizing the 4 pillars of any community, which is education, economic development, safety, and health and human services. And whether you're rural, whether you're suburban or urban, those are the 4, and they interact with one another. So in well-to-do communities, if you have high education and high economic development, you will tend to have low safety needs and low human service needs. In underserved communities, you will have low education, low economic development. You will have high safety needs, and high human service needs. And so programming doesn't change the dials. If you looked at those as 4 dials from 0 to 10, programming doesn't change the dials. So we had to come up with mechanisms that actually changed all the dials at the same time, looking at those 4 pillars, and to organize the community around its own will. What do you will things to be? And so we looked at this comprehensive organization by taking a look at the community and all of its stakeholders. We named in 2012 the stakeholders the Network of Woodlawn. We have the 4 pillars. Each one of these 4 pillars is their own 501c3s and has their own boards. But all the boards interconnect through the executive directors back to the broader board. And what we have found is that this, when we created it in 2012, has worked. In education, we have no underperforming schools in Woodlawn. Our safety program has gone very well. In 2012, we had 23 homicides in the 2 square miles in Woodlawn. In 2013, after we implemented the plan, we went down to 8. In 2014, we went down to 4. In 2015, we were at 4. In 2016, we were at 4. And it's still 4 too many. But in comparison, we believe that we understand how to get at the safety. And then we in 2013, we began our economic development movement. And currently we now have, and make a long story short, we currently now have a economic development master plan for all of Woodlawn that we had engaged Skidmore, Owings, and Merrill to do. So we looked at this as a systematic approach and tried to make sure that we aligned all of the different elements together. And in that element, we had the community element. We have what is called One Woodlawn. And so no matter which part of Woodlawn you live in, people try to separate West Woodlawn from East Woodlawn. And that doesn't work because the ecology of community should be just one. And so we have One Woodlawn, and we looked at the different stakeholders. So we have institutional stakeholders, which are all the major institutions, the University of Chicago, Mount Carmel High School, the schools, the parks, and so forth. They're in the institutions. They care about their investment. They care about money. Then we have the Jackson Park group. These are people who care about birds, trees, and squirrels. They're in a group. You can't put the two in the same room together and try to get a vision. It doesn't work. I've tried it and it doesn't work. Then the third group are all the boards of the Network of Woodlawn, which are about 60 different board members because of the pillars. They care about people. So you got institutions, then you have the parks, then you have the boards. We also then have the parents around every school who may not feel engaged enough, and so we go to them as opposed to them coming to us. And then we took Woodlawn based on our economic development plan and divided it up into 4 quadrants. And we have 15 to 20 people, residents, planning for Woodlawn all at the same time in the 4 quadrants. So we actually have pretty close to 100 to 125 people engaged in Woodlawn in various factors all at the same time. We have a master plan, we have quadrants, we have parents, we've done workshops. This is, and when we do our One Woodlawn meetings, which we have every quarter, we have nothing less than 400 people in the last 9 community meetings that we've had. So we believe that we have a good formula for success, but we found that what we produced is not fundable by philanthropy or by government. They do not, they fund programmatically. They don't fund infrastructure. They don't fund an ecology of a community, at least not to date. So what we did was since you have to have this organization, the organization has to have people and has to have funding. So what the Brazier Foundation did is that we went out and we began and started a manufacturing L3C. It's called BSD, Building Self-Determination. And it has 3 aspects to it. The first is it is a workforce development, which is the critical element to this, where we train residents in robotic controls. It's a 4-stage stackable workforce development program that is in a leading edge, and we create a support system so that the residents move from training into jobs, and the support system stays with them even when they move to the job. Because what we found is that people require everybody who's successful that moves to success always has a support system. All of us have had and still have support systems that undergird us either in mentoring or in sponsorship in some way, form, or fashion. And we will continue to do that with them. When we were trying to figure out how we would fund this, we originally went to Chase, and they funded a $50,000 grant for us. The Apostolic Church of God, which is the church that I pastor, put up another $50,000. We produced this. This program that we have now is currently college accredited through the city colleges, and we currently, in the program and the classes actually are provided on the campus of Chicago State University. Our original funding for the manufacturing actually came from the Chicago Housing Authority. They gave us a grant of $2 million. And it was a funny story. I'll tell you this funny story as long as you don't tell anybody else. I had already worked it out with the Chicago Housing Authority, and they said, and Mr. John Hooker, a tremendous man, he said, I want to invest in people, not just buildings. And I gave him this idea of this workforce development. And we took it in, and he agreed. We took it through some CHA rigors. And then we finally said, well, you have to get the support of the mayor. So I went to the mayor and I said, we'd like your support in this. And they said, the CHA can't do this. And I said, yes, they can. And he said, no, they can't do this. And I said, Mr. Mayor, yes, they can. And he said, I sat on this board for 2 years, 3 years, before I was a congressman. They can't do this. And I said, Mr. Mayor, they can do this. He said, so if I call John Hooker right now, would he tell me, what would he tell me? Yeah, I said, he would tell you he could do it. He left the room, made a call, and came back and said, okay. And that was the end of the $2 million. And so when we opened up the plant, he said that was the easiest $2 million I ever got. Not knowing all the different things that had to go on before that. But the idea is that the CHA wanted to invest in its people, and that's what we're doing. And now we will be training up to 90 CHA residents in robotic controls every year for the next 5 years. We have a robotics plant where we make plastic utensil products, and our apprentices run the plant. There was a gentleman who was a maintenance person. He's 54 years old. He was a maintenance custodian. He went through the entire training. He is now one of our primary operators in this manufacturing plant. We have 2 major manufacturing lines. FANUC and Motion Controls are the producers of these products. And so we actually make the plastic utensils, and we market that into the open market. The Hyatt Hotels are a client. The University of Chicago Hospitals are a client. Midway Distributors, which handles the Cook County Jail, is one of our clients. And one of our other major clients is the Thornton Fractional High School System. And by the way, we are looking for more clients. And the idea is that the revenues from this L3C, which is a low profit, actually fund the infrastructure that we have. But it has the possibilities through our revenue projections that it will fund every school in Woodlawn an additional $250,000 a year over its current budget. We will fully fund our safety program, which is no longer fundable because our safety numbers are so low, and we're off everybody's list. And when we went to people and said, we need to continue what we've been doing, they said, well, we can't give you any money because you're not bad enough. I said, so I have to go back to 23 homicides before you help me. And they said, yes, which is crazy, if you want to think about it, but that's the way the philanthropy situation is. So we'll be able to fully fund our safety program, which includes response, intervention, as well as prevention. And what we see in this is that the ability for a community to replicate both the organizations, as well as not necessarily manufacturing. It could be any social type enterprise that uses and leverages the the spend of commercial business, as opposed to them giving you a part of their economic engine, and especially if they have a social impact view to the world, you will find that communities like Woodlawn can leverage that capability and leverage that for their advantage. So it did require a initial investment through government, but I explained to the mayor, I said, once we do this, I won't have to come back. And then this is replicatable to the west side of Chicago, to the southern suburbs, and to the 130 mayors that you might be looking at, or to the other those who are here. The business to business, the commercial development, all of that is possible when looked at as a total package and an ecology of a community around those four pillars. Thank you very much. I can take a few questions.
Dr. Brazier, thank you very much. It was a great story and maybe the best story I've heard in a week. So thank you very much.
Very well.
Your calm demeanor likely overshadows some of the harder parts of getting some of your efforts done. And so maybe a two-part question. Number one, what were some of the mistakes that were made? And number two, is it really replicable without, sort of another Dr. Brazier along the way? And how do you actually, sort of extend that to other communities?
Sure. The one is that the mission of the Brazier Foundation is not to just stay in Woodlawn, but to tell the story and to support other communities. So the consulting practice of the Brazier Foundation does do that part. The lessons learned is you have to stay focused on what you want to build. And it took me 2 years to get the members of the Network of Woodlawn board to be able to follow the vision that says this is where we're going. This is safe for us. And they have to trust in the convener. So you can have a lot of leaders, but there must be a convener of the leaders in order to make this work. And it doesn't require a church I have a very large church, and people have said, even the mayor said, there aren't those size churches in the other neighborhoods. And I explained to them, I said, my father was a convener when we had 100 members. So the convener doesn't have to be a pastor, or it has to be somebody that the other leaders trust. And then if in fact you have a pathway that says, and we had to prove that this pathway worked, and it does work. Now that the pathway works, we can now explain this to others and say, this is what has taken place, this is what's happened. And every community will have its own set of dynamics. But I believe that we have a possible way to address the four pillars, and it doesn't address everything. But it's at a high enough level. It's not 40,000 square feet, but it's not ground roots, even though you touch everybody. It is at a place where people can see a vision, and Woodlawn will change. And one of the things that we're doing, someone mentioned, they talked about the repurposing. We're going to repurpose 3 elementary schools that were closed. We're going to repurpose those. And we're going to turn them into a Monadnock building type environment with retail on the first floor. We're going to rent out space on the other 2 floors for lawyers, architects, so forth and so on. And I believe that there are enough downtown folk who want to be in a different place where there's parking and parks and things of that nature. And we're going to make that available. So all these things, so once you start it, it will begin to replicate. And as long as you don't try to control it or manage it, but like you're trying to hold on to a marshmallow, you can't hold on to it too tight. If in fact you just let things organically grow, it will happen. Yes, ma'am.
I want to congratulate you on a great program here. I'm from Marquette University, and we're doing something very similar on the Near West Side Partnership Program. When Dr. Lovell came to Marquette, he pulled together our regional corporations to see how we can really transform the area near the West Side Partners. So I want to invite you to Milwaukee. I think this would be a great program to put both of these programs together. And just like you said, the trust factor is huge. We've certainly seen that at Marquette. But each area has its own DNA and its own types of challenges. But to bring something together like this, I don't know, Kelly, maybe this is something that we could look at in terms of who else around the tri-state is actually doing that. So that's great.
Well, but I want you to be careful. Don't call it a program.
Sorry.
That's okay. That's okay. The language becomes very important. What you're dealing with is how do you build a community, not how do you develop one, but building a community from the inside out that then that helps smooth out the burden that everybody else has to carry, because we will in fact be able to take care of ourselves in a manner that we could not have done before, and it really brings about. The BSD actually stands for Building Self-Determination, and that's exactly what we want to do.
Here we go. Hello. I want
Yes,
to
sir.
ask a real quick question. First and foremost, congratulations on your project.
Thank you.
The gentleman over there sort of stole the question that I wanted to ask, but I do have a two-part question. One, what makes your church special in terms of doing this type of work? Because I know you tried to stray away from the size of, the church. You could be a small congregation at 100 and still be a convener. But there's something uniquely special about you in this whole sea of pastoral leaders across this region. So what makes you special to be able to stand here today and really provide a vision that I have personally been looking for out of pastoral leaders for a long time? And number two, you have a workforce development component that you've built. But what about the wealth creation part? Are you going to pivot at some point in time to create the manufacturers out of that portfolio that you have that will actually go out and create those jobs?
The first question, I believe, comes down to some of my uniqueness and background. I ended my commercial career with IBM as a business unit executive, and where I handled public sector and did very well. And I was the chief information officer for the Chicago Housing Authority for a few years before I went into the ministry. And so when you couple my theological degree with my business acumen, and you bring the two strategic pieces together, it kind of gives you a flavor for that. And I say that without taking my calling and divine intervention into play. It's not just me. The things that we were able to do actually worked out. And then your second question dealt with when do we pivot? A part of our next, we have two or three more initiatives that we have. One deals with how do we create more franchisees from franchisors, so that those who have backgrounds can actually own a franchise, and how do we help fund them? The second is that we make the three buildings that I talked to you about revenue centers, and these are profit centers that then continue to feed into our education and safety and economic development programming. And then the third is that we will take on additional manufacturing lines, and we will then probably have a greater capacity for jobs. But our primary effort in our workforce development is to place the 90 residents that we train every year into jobs in manufacturing, wherever they may be. If they're in North Carolina, if they're in Omaha, it doesn't matter where they are. These people will be trained and certified to be robotic controllers.
One last question. Anybody from that side of the room?
Maybe because I was turned this way. Maybe I should turn this way. I don't want to leave anybody out. I'm actually heavily right-handed, so it's easy for me to kind of shift that way. Thank you very much.